Hello and welcome to the Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinx. My name is Chris.
And my name is Justin.
And my name is Mike. As always, we like to start off every episode talking about what is on our minds, which is usually the media we've been watching or reading or whatever the past week. Then, for our feature review, we will be reviewing Overlord, which will contain a spoiler-free section before moving into spoilers.
Yeah, and don't forget that each month we review a film from the Criterion Collection, which is voted on by the listeners, you, the listeners. So go check out last month's episode on The Blob, and look for our next episode on Tokyo Story, which was this month's winner. And for those of you that want to know what percentage they came in at, Tokyo Story came in at 53%, Brief Encounter came in at 26%, and Tree of Life, unfortunately, came in at 21%. But I am looking forward to Tokyo Story very much.
Yeah, Justin won this round.
Yeah.
I had Brief Encounter with 26%, which lost, but not as bad as Tree of Life.
Have you won one yet,
which
Mike?
That surprised me. I feel like I won...
Didn't you win Notorious?
Oh, yeah.
I did win Notorious.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, the Hitchcock one.
Yeah, this is my first win, and I'm super excited about Tokyo Story, but also I do feel like I lost a little bit because I was excited about watching Tree of Life yet again, even though I just watched it recently.
Well, there's nothing keeping you from watching it.
That's true.
Yeah,
good point. Touche. I'll sit down.
Yeah. Well, anyways, so be on the lookout for the next poll. We will announce a theme soon for this month, and based on that theme, we will each choose another film in the Criterion Collection, which you can vote on.
Yeah, and you can vote in the poll on our social media accounts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Casual Cinecast. You can also send us questions or topics you want us to discuss on each film that we're covering each week. You can also send those to our email at casualcinemedia@gmail.com. And as always, don't forget to go into iTunes, give us a 5-star review. Let us know what you think about the show, what you like, what you don't like, but mostly what you like.
Thank you in advance. All right, gentlemen, are we ready to move into what has been on our minds this week?
I certainly am.
All right, let's do it. All right, Justin. Are you listening? Are you here?
Yeah, I didn't go anywhere over the last 10 seconds of that bumper.
I was worried for you.
Yeah, well, I thought we might have lost you in the bumper. Okay, thank goodness.
Yeah.
What is on your mind this week?
Okay, so this week I watched a film that we brought up on our Casually Criterion episode from October, the last one that we did, which we were talking about The Blob, and we were all talking about the richness of the colors in The Blob and how great they looked. And I believe it was you, Mike, you brought up a film called All That Heaven Allows. That was you, right?
I did. That was me.
Yeah, so I
did
started
I inspire you to watch something?
You did. You did. That's where I'm going with this. So you inspired me to want to watch the film again, and then I went to Barnes & Noble to take advantage of the 50% off Criterion
I inspired
sale.
You to buy something?
Yes and no. I mean, I wasn't planning on buying it until I was going through like all the Criterions.
It was
there.
all me.
Yeah, you take the credit. I don't care. That's fine.
I will.
But yeah, so I bought it at the Criterion sale, and I bought the Blu-ray, which I think previously when I watched it, it was in a cinema history class, and I think we watched the Criterion DVD. So I've never seen the film in any sort of HD capacity. So
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I was very excited, especially thinking about how good the film looks and how rich the colors are.
Yeah,
and
I was in that same class, and I've only seen that one showing of the movie that you're referring to in standard definition.
Yep, on a not that great like school projector.
yeah, on a college projector that was likely years old with a dull bulb.
Mm-hmm. Right, so I wanted to see the film again. So I watched it shortly after buying it, and for those that don't know, it's the story of a upper-class widow who is played by Jane Wyman, and she develops a relationship with her pretty much like ridiculously handsome gardener who's played by Rock Hudson, and she then has to deal with like her upper-class friends and her, upper-class raised children who are being very petty and gossipy about the whole relationship. Basically looking down on her for dating a gardener.
Classists.
And yeah, it's very, very classist. I'm not sure if anywhere in there is like a metaphor for racism, because the film came out in like 1955, but I might just be getting it mixed up with the film that's kind of like All That Heaven Allows. What's the more recent
Far
one
From
with Julianne
Heaven.
Moore? Yeah.
The Todd Haynes film.
Yeah, I think that one has to do with racism.
Definitely has to do with racism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I'm just getting them mixed up. But anyways.
Well, they're the same movie. It's just Far From Heaven is like an updated story. But it's the same story. Not the same movie. I shouldn't say that. But
right.
Definitely heavily inspired by.
For sure. And it even borrows like the rich color thing.
Mm-hmm.
Which,
and its title.
That's true.
It's just a play on heaven. Yeah.
Okay, well, so rewatching this film for a second time, I have to say that I think it's a great film. I remember liking it before, but watching it this time, it's great. And I think we were very right to think of it when we started talking about films with rich color, because like the color in the film is amazing. Like,
yeah, even on that projector, I remember that screening it being a very visually lush and visually striking movie.
Yeah, it's so saturated. Like they just jump out and like kind of like metaphorically punch you in the face.
It's like a play.
Sometimes
it just feels so staged. The whole thing, like Gone with the Wind, kind of like just
yes.
The colors are just so like not even real how rich they are.
Right, like the light that's coming in through the window from outside is legitimately blue.
Yeah, it's literally a light with a blue filter on it.
Yeah. So like, you know, in real life, daylight is warmer than like inside tungsten regular light bulbs. Like those are orange and the daylight is blue, like in real life, but like we don't really notice it. This like film goes balls to the walls blue, and it's great. And like if anyone wants to see a film with like a great use of colors, and especially colors of light, I highly recommend watching the film. But to move off of that a little bit, like the performances are also really great. Rock Hudson is so like handsome and charming in the film. Like both mine and my girlfriend who watched the film with me, but like both our knees were like a little weak watching, and we were both kind of swooning a little bit. Like
my grandma is still not over Rock Hudson being gay.
Yeah,
she's still not. She brings it up all the time, every time he's on TV.
Yeah, I mean he plays like the leading man so well in like this and Pillow Talk, and I forget one of the other like films with him and Doris Day that I haven't seen. Yeah, he's like
so many
handsome.
things.
And
yeah.
I mean I guess he's such like a great romantic leading man from like straight romantic movies that like it's hard to imagine, I guess, if you grew up watching him that way, I guess.
Yeah, it certainly came as a shock to her.
Yeah, I bet. But yeah, so the movie's, like you said, it's very staged feeling, like, and it's very melodramatic in terms of its story, and it's kind of over the top in some areas, which I think could rub some people the wrong way, especially like a modern audience without like that old film sensibility built in. If you're not that accustomed to watching that sort of thing, there's probably some very cheesy stuff in here. But
if you go in knowing it's a melodrama, though, it's all in the genre melodrama, you know.
Right. Yeah. So if you go in prepared, it's probably okay. But I mean, for me, like the movie is just like, I can't think of a better word. I tried to, because I don't know that this word will sound right coming like out of my mouth, because it's not a word I say very often, but it's just a steamy romance, right? Like you just watch it and you're like, oh my gosh, like I can feel, it's like kind of like Notorious at times in terms of just like how,
well, that like old palpable, Hollywood sensibility, that old Hollywood kind of romance, you know?
Yeah. The sexual tension is like palpable, basically.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, and it's a great movie. And again, beautiful cinematography. Can't recommend it highly enough. There's some interesting special features, which I haven't watched all of, but there's a whole special feature about Rock Hudson and his homosexuality that is very interesting. I watched about 15 minutes of it, where it's like a guy, I think he's like half reading Rock Hudson letters that he really wrote, but then half filling them in and like writing his own writing but like from the perspective of Rock Hudson, and he's like on screen reading them, but it's just a guy. It's not Rock Hudson. It's hard to explain, but it was pretty interesting. But it was like an hour long, and I only made it through about 15 minutes before I had to do something else.
Huh. Well, that sounds weird. Yeah,
it's a bizarre like video essay type thing, but I want to watch the whole thing, and maybe I'll report back after I finish it. But other than that, it seemed like there's some more normal special features, and it's a great addition, and it looks great.
If you and your girlfriend like Rock Hudson, I think you should go through Rock Hudson's filmography, especially the Doris Day stuff. There's some great stuff from what I hear.
Yeah,
I haven't watched a whole lot. I watched Pillow Talk with you, but there's a whole lot of stuff in there that I think is even, from what I understand, better than Pillow Talk.
Yeah, we watched Pillow Talk together, which she loves. It's like one of her favorite films, and then we watched, I believe it was called Lover Don't Come Back, or Lover Come Back.
Mm-hmm.
Not Don't Come Back. Yeah, it was Lover Come Back, and I liked that one better than Pillow Talk, but she liked Pillow Talk better. So we've made it through a little bit of those, but there are definitely more of those films to watch, and we should. You're right.
So real quick before we move off this, I've seen this movie. I thought that I hadn't. I was mistaken. But yeah, you guys are exactly right about the colors. And what I wanted to add to that is the colors are so rich and so bright. It matches the melodrama and the emotions, because the emotions are also over the top. So the colors aren't quite real.
The emotions are saturated as well.
And so I think that those two things go so well together. And it also has continued in Far From Heaven and then Julianne Moore film. But like, yeah, I really enjoyed this film as well.
Cool. Maybe we'll cover it on an episode sometime, a Casually Criterion episode.
Yeah.
It does fit the criteria.
True. Cool. Well, yeah, so that's it. That's all I have for what's on my mind this week. So, Mike, what is on your mind?
So recently, I have been slacking in watching movies and TV shows to talk about, thanks to Red Dead Redemption 2.
Tisk, tisk.
I know. But luckily, I'm starting to get back into watching things now. I have emerged from my room. Yeah, I beat the game. So I have been watching a show called Star Wars Resistance, which is the newest animated cartoon in the Star Wars universe. It's a relatively new show on the Disney Channel or Disney XD, one of those. They recently put out the 6th episode of the first season, so the show is still pretty new. So I don't know how I feel about the show as a whole yet, but so far, I dig it. This show is obviously aimed at a much younger audience, but it's still very watchable for any age. Disney's pretty good at making cartoons that, pretty much any age can enjoy. It actually takes place about 6 months before The Force Awakens. And the creators of the show said that it's actually going to eventually overlap with the sequel films.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought so. And anyway, the voice cast for this show includes Oscar Isaac and Gwendolyn Christie performing their roles as Poe Dameron and Captain Phasma, respectively, from the movies. So it kind of fleshes things out a bit more. Ultimately, this show is about a young, kind of privileged kid named Kaz who meets Poe Dameron one day while flying a job for the New Republic Navy, or whatever is the name of the government he has. Anyways, they have a little adventure, and Poe Dameron decides to trust him to be a spy for the Resistance. So he sends him to a gas station racing town on a water planet to basically spy on this new emerging threat called the First Order.
Oh, so we get to kind of find out more about the First Order and maybe their emergence and how they got to be where they are in Force Awakens?
Exactly, which is my biggest problem with The Force Awakens. I thought The Force Awakens was a really awesomely paced movie. Very, very watchable. A lot of fun to rewatch, but after so long, I was kind of disappointed that there was a whole bunch of stuff they apparently cut that kind of explained the state of the galaxy. Spoilers for The Force Awakens. At some point during that movie, the entire government gets destroyed in a huge attack, but that's not really focused on to any kind of satisfying way. So when The Force Awakens starts, it kind of just seems like nothing has really changed that much from when the Empire failed, from Return of the Jedi, 30 years earlier. So this show is kind of filling in the gaps and letting you know, most people don't even realize the First Order is a thing. The First Order is basically a wild alt-right group that no one's thinking about, The Resistance themselves are thought of as extremists. That's all filled out in some cartoon, right? That's not something that's ever even really discussed in the movies.
Right.
Which in my opinion is a fault of the storytelling. But also, as someone who likes expanded media and following one story over different kinds of media, like a cartoon and a movie, etc., it's kind of fun. But I can only really recommend it if you're a fan of Star Wars and doing that kind of thing,
Yeah,
right.
I've seen the first 3 episodes of this, and I enjoyed what I watched. And what you say, I didn't know, that they're going to kind of expound upon the movies, which makes it really exciting, and especially once they move past the First Order and stuff like that, that'll be really fun, I think.
Yeah, the series moves. It's a very watchable cartoon.
Yeah.
It's like a Saturday morning cartoon. Mm-hmm. It's breezy. It's fun. It's often funny.
Right.
In my opinion.
There's certain characters that are pretty funny. The other thing that I like about this, or that you kind of have to give time, especially with the Star Wars cartoons that I've found so far, especially Rebels. It was Star Wars Rebels. It started off and it was kind of like very young aged.
Yeah.
But then as the characters develop and as you get to know them, it slowly becomes this thing that's much more dense and complicated emotionally. And I thought Star Wars Rebels was really good, especially the last couple of seasons. So I'm hoping the same thing happens here.
I agree. I think the Rebels cartoon got better as it went on, and I have no doubt that this show will as well. But what I will say is, I know this may be an unpopular opinion with Star Wars fans, but in my opinion, Star Wars Resistance starts out stronger than either Clone Wars or Star Wars Rebels cartoons did.
Yeah, I
like both of those shows okay, but they took me a few episodes to get into, and I had to like force myself to do it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Resistance comes to me a lot easier. It just seems like a lot easier and a lot breezier to watch, and it's just a joy. Like, it puts me in a good mood.
That's awesome.
As opposed to like having to power through it to get to the good stuff, which eventually does come in those other cartoons, and I still like those cartoons for what they are.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think the animation in this show is way more interesting. Like, it's based on anime, and it's kind of like cel shaded.
Yeah,
it's like a weird mix that I find very, very interesting and pleasing to watch.
Yeah, the Star Wars Rebels animation was a little weird because it was kind of this plasticky,
like blocky.
Yeah.
Which it looks like that cheap CGI cartoon.
Yeah.
That like, you know, Nick Jr. makes or whatever.
Yeah. But eventually you get used to it, and it doesn't matter quite as much, you know, once you get to know the characters. And
right.
Yeah. But I agree. I'm excited to watch the next 3 episodes and see where this goes. And I think this is going to be a much longer season. I think this is like 20 episodes, correct?
Yeah, it's 22 episodes. But so far, there has been not that much like boring filler stuff. You know, there's some of that, which is inevitable in a 22-episode season of anything. But whenever they're like 22-minute cartoons, it's very easy to tolerate that kind of thing, I think.
I agree.
So anyways, that's all I've really got so far is 6 episodes in. It's breezy, fun to watch, but it could still really go either way.
So I assume that it being between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens, that you don't have to have seen either of the other 2 Star Wars series to start watching this one. It kind of stands on its own.
Correct. So far, there have been no references to Clone Wars or Rebels.
Okay. Maybe I can go into that because like you, I'm struggling to get into the start of one of the other series. I'm not really even sure which one it is. I think it might be Clone Wars. But I've tried to watch the first episode like 4 times, and I either like fall asleep or get interested in something else.
So as far as
those shows get good, but it takes a few hours of investment.
Clone Wars actually
is a lot to ask of some people.
Yeah, and what I actually did with Clone Wars, and because I wasn't a big fan of it, and I never really caught on. And it also, I wasn't a fan of the way they did the news. They like Clone Wars is set up like it's a news reel. So like this week and blah 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 quadrant.
Okay.
And so it skips around.
And that's
a
the
lot.
one I tried to watch.
Yeah, so you can go online, and this is what I did, and watch them in chronological order. So you're not skipping around and watching things that like out of order, kind of. Does that make sense? The one thing that I really liked about Clone Wars was they had, what was the name of the character? She went into Star Wars Rebels.
Oh, Ahsoka Tano.
Yeah, so Ahsoka
Katano.
Katano, yeah. She's a good character. Clone Wars started off with a movie, in fact, so you and she's in that. But then she has an arc there's 2 arcs, actually. There's a, spoiler alert, Darth Maul arc that ends in Rebels. And then there's the Ahsoka Katano arc that you should watch. And so it's just like 2 or 3 episodes of each. Go online and find them. Because I personally don't think you really need to watch all of Clone Wars. However, Star Wars Rebels is good, and you'd need to watch those in order.
Yeah, and what I will say, though, is before we move on, I definitely think you should watch Resistance, even if Clone Wars doesn't do it for you. But what I will say is after binging through it and eventually getting into the Clone Wars, the animated show, it does make me care about the characters of younger Obi-Wan and Anakin Skywalker more because they are handled better in that show than they were in the actual movies that the show takes place between.
Yeah,
So,
agreed.
just fun fact, if the character of Anakin Skywalker still sucks to you, there's some good stuff out there with him. You just have to kind of make yourself get to it. And I know we're probably making a lot of Star Wars fans mad, so let me reiterate that I do like those shows.
Yeah.
But I think Resistance is much easier to watch. It's more like a traditional, fast-paced, quick cartoon.
Awesome.
So that does it for me this week. I will be watching more over the next week. But like I said, I just got out from under the spell of Red Dead Redemption 2. So Chris, this week, what is on your mind?
Funny you should mention how you just got out from under the spell of Red Dead Redemption 2. I actually am still a little bit under the spell. I beat the main storyline, and
Nice.
I'm in the epilogue, but I am emerging. I left my house today. I saw my shadow, so 3 more weeks of winter.
Is that why it's so cold?
Yeah, I think that, or yeah,
Damn you,
winter
Chris.
starts. Yeah, I'm sorry. Blame Red Dead Redemption. But yeah, I really like this game. I think, and I know this isn't a video game podcast, but I do think that there is qualities in this game that make it cinematic. I think that there are things. I think the best way to describe it is it's a combination of like Fallout, where it's just this open world where you can kind of do whatever you want, and then it's combined with a storyline game like Mass Effect or something like that, where those games aren't as open world. So it's these two things that are just combined, and you can kind of just do whatever you want in this game. But ultimately the storyline, and that's kind of what I was in it for in the first place, but the storyline is so great. And as you progress through the story, you get to know the characters, and you start to like the characters more because you spend so much time with them. Like when you first start playing the game, you walk into the camp, and it's hard to distinguish each character from the other one. But as you get to know them, you know who they are, and it's just really does a great job of developing the characters, and especially the main character that you're playing as is really great. Anyways, I really enjoyed this. And I recommend that if you guys are playing it now, please finish the story because it's worth it. So, yeah, that's what's on my mind.
Yeah, no, so I will jump off of that and say I have beaten the epilogue. And so obviously I know exactly what you're talking about, and I can confirm, yes, finish this game. If there ever was a video game story to not, like, burn out on before you finish, it's this one. It may be recency bias, but I genuinely cannot remember a video game story being more moving to me than this game.
Yeah, there's a couple of Final Fantasies that I played way back in the day that I really liked. But yes, you're right. You get connected to these characters, and
just the journey you go on. The almost contradictory to your expectations kind of things that the Rockstar does here. You know, like there's no such thing as a boss fight in this kind of game. You know what I mean? Like there's no...
Right. Like
instead of teetering to a climax, it builds and builds and builds to an emotionally satisfying climax and then chills out.
Yeah.
You know, and like the maturity it assumes that you have, and the amount of respect it gives its audience, it's just unparalleled in video game publishing. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, just the way the video game is paced from the very beginning moments, it is a slow pace. Like the way he walks in camp is so slow. You have to be patient with this game in order to do stuff. And there's a certain meditative quality about doing these things and about playing this game. Like riding a horse around everywhere is one of the most satisfying things I've ever done in a video game. You know, like you'd think, oh, I got to ride my horse over here or over there. You know what? It's actually not that bad, and it's kind of
it's
fun.
A joy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And the thing is, it's like you can get around and like in this game and just play around and never finish the story. And most people won't, because the story is massive. The thing is an epic in every sense of the word.
Yeah, definitely agreed.
But if you can do it, and if you can, I don't know, find the time and just not give up on it, I think when you're done, you will be happy that you finished the story, because I agree with you. Like the characters are so well told. If you liked Red Dead Redemption 1 like 8 years ago, and that game made an impression on you, and you like that story, finish this one. It's just better in every way. And anyway, speaking of the acting, I hear that the main voice actor for Arthur Morgan, which is the main character, is going up for like best acting awards in video games, which is cool and well deserved. So hopefully he wins that, because
he's really good. Yeah,
the emotional depth which this game gives you is just, like I said, unparalleled in any video game that I've ever completed. And I did the Mass Effect trilogy. I play a lot of RPG games.
Mm-hmm.
I like story-based games. Those, like, it almost has to be a story-based game for me to care at all.
Yeah, to motivate you to continue.
Yeah, because I'm not much of like a shoot 'em up kind of guy, but I love stories, and this is up there amongst one of the most patient and thoughtful video game stories that I've played.
Agreed. Yeah, it's a great game. Totally worth $60, and yeah, if you haven't and you want to, try it.
80 hours of your life.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of consumed my life. I find myself talking in a Western drawl on accident. And going.
I find myself like unwilling to do basic like functions to live.
Yeah, just
until I get done with the game. Yeah. I'm like, oh God, I don't want to eat right now. I just really want to like keep playing, or I don't want to go to sleep.
Yeah,
or work.
Showering, I can get away with that without doing that for like 2 more days, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like one shower is like one mission.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's been what's on my mind. Check it out if you haven't. Yeah. So I guess we're about to move into our feature film, huh?
It does feel like it's about that time. Does anyone else have anything before we move into our review of Overlord?
Not a damn thing.
Cursing, please.
Yikes. Okay.
Yeah.
So here we go. Here's our review of Overlord.
Welcome to France.
What happened here? Some questions don't have good answers.
There's a lot of soldiers out there, and there's only 4 of us.
Find out what's inside that compound.
Okay, guys, so as always, just wanted to let you know that we will be speaking very general about the film and not spoiling anything for the first little while. And before we get into spoilers, we'll give you a big, noticeable, awesome spoiler alert. What was that?
I was just adding it will be sizable.
Sizable. I thought you said advisable. And I was like, well, kind of.
Yeah, both. Why not?
Cool, yeah. So anyways, you'll hear that spoiler alert. You can pause, stop listening, go see the film if you want, and then come back and finish the episode.
All right. So, Overlord, directed by Julius Avery, starring Jovan Adepo, Wyatt Russell, Mathilde Olivier?
That would have been my guess.
Mathilde Olivier?
Yeah, I would have said it exactly like that, except just maybe less high-pitched.
Yeah.
Matilda?
I regret that now. Pilo Aspic. I looked up how to say that. I think Aspic is correct, but you know what?
Sounds good.
I don't understand that character.
I have a question
By character,
really
do you
quick.
mean his character in the film or the letters in his name?
Yeah, the character between the B and the K in his last name. The letter.
Yeah, it's like the weird like A and E backwards, like E pushed together.
Yeah, like pushed together. Yeah, it's bonkers. I don't get it. But anyway, there you go, Pilu Aspic.
Nice.
All right, the IMDb synopsis says, a small group of American soldiers find horror behind enemy lines on the eve of D-Day.
Yeah.
Guys, Overlord, do you guys mind if I go first when talking about this film?
I would encourage it.
Okay, good. I want to get it out there. So this movie somewhat intrigued me based on the trailer. I do enjoy a good adventure action film. I wasn't super sure if this was going to be an action film or a horror movie or what, based on the advertisements. So there was a fun mystery surrounding the film, which is fun to go into with a movie for the first time, right? Having kind of like an intentional mystery around it, you know? I think this film is pretty fun when it finally gets into full swing, but it does take, at least speaking for myself, probably until Act 2 to get interesting, which is probably like 20 to 25 minutes in. It's not ever terrible, but at the start of the film, it feels a little odd and it moves really quickly. And I feel like it doesn't really give me adequate time to connect with any of the characters. Basically, we're just in a big hurry to get all of our main characters where they need to be for the rest of the movie to unfold. So I feel like it all happens real quick. But like I said earlier, I think this film is pretty shamelessly fun when we get into Act 2. And with the mission being their key focus, it kind of becomes one of those like soldier on a mission plots. Like Tarantino calls these movies like a men on a mission movie, you know, which is like a group of guys single-handedly doing a job that is more important than any one man. I dig that kind of movie. And I also enjoy that this movie leans into its R rating, which is really nice. I just wish I had cared about any of the characters. And that's kind of where I'll leave off for now and pass it over to Chris.
All right, yeah. Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome, Chris.
So yeah, this is one of my most anticipated fall movies, and so I was definitely looking forward to watching it. I think I'm actually a little bit opposite of you, Mike. So I really enjoyed the first two acts, like almost from the very beginning. It moves at a pace that's so quick that like you can't even really think about what's happening because it just keeps moving so quickly, and there's some really great set pieces that are in it, especially at the beginning. There's a really great one, and then more in the middle, and there's actually one at the end that's really good too. Yeah, it just moves at a clip that's just really fast. I like how the main character, Jovan Adepo, he doesn't talk very much in this movie, and I think that's mainly because we're supposed to be seeing things through his eyes. So he doesn't have much of a character here, but like we just see things through his eyes, his wide eyes, as he's just staring at these impossible things that he's watching, and I found that really intriguing and compelling. You know, I actually, maybe you guys can answer this question for me real quick, but Wyatt Russell, is he in any way related to Kurt Russell?
Only in the fact that he's his son.
Yeah.
Is that because I have in my notes here and I had no idea, but I was like, I put Kurt Russell ? Because I was like, this is a role that Kurt Russell could have played, and I actually really enjoyed Wyatt Russell in his role, and I thought
he reminded me, like, I know he's Wyatt Russell now. Right, but it reminded me of a mix between Michael Pitt and Jason Segel.
Oh, really?
Interesting.
That's weird. But I didn't know that he was related, and I wrote down Kurt Russell. I was like, this is a Kurt Russell role. But yeah, so that's really interesting. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, although I think that the third act kind of lost its pacing a little bit. But I liked it, and I think that the first two acts are worth it, even though the third act may not be quite what I was wanting. So yeah, that's those are my thoughts, and I was just thinking to myself, what are your thoughts, Justin?
Were you thinking that?
Yeah, I was.
Because I was too.
Good. So I was mainly intrigued by this film because you had it on your most anticipated movies of the fall episode, Chris. I had not even really heard of the film prior to you talking about it on that, and your excitement for it got me excited for it. You know, I wanted to see something my friend was excited about.
You're welcome.
And then, thank you. And then I saw the trailer, and I thought, oh, I don't know, like this looks like it could maybe be really bad, but maybe have like some surprises, because I think, like you said, Mike, you know, that it's got a mystery about it that it doesn't reveal, and it just like sets up the mystery in the trailer. And I was like, well, depending on where that goes, maybe it could be really good.
Sure.
But I was basically like, the film could go either way on the trailer for me. So now that I've seen the film, which I saw it in IMAX, by the way, so it was like really loud and in my face, which was pretty effective for certain portions of the movie.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, so I just want to get that out there. Definitely an IMAX experience for sure that felt worth the ticket price.
Wow, that's awesome.
At least in terms of spectacle. So I have a feeling that, you know, either you guys, or if I read some articles or critiques of this film from a film critic or whatever, I have a feeling that there will be plenty of issues and problems that can be brought up. But for me, I pretty much just had a great time watching this movie, at least for about 3/4 of the film. And in that sense, I'm a little bit closer to where Chris is about the film than Mike. in the sense that the first 3/4 of the film I really liked. Like, I found it interesting. I found it fun. It moved along really quickly. It was exciting. I have kind of one issue with some things that are going on in the second act, but I'll save that for spoilers. But outside of that, I just wasn't really thinking about any sort of, plot holes or logic gaps, or, I wasn't like really critiquing the film. I was just enjoying the ride. And for me, it basically feels like a B movie, like something like kind of a late night grindhouse, like modern grindhouse horror film, something like what is the Dead Snow, like that sort of like category. Like in a different movie might have gone straight to DVD, but what I feel this film does, like, it treats this B movie plot with like a seriousness that reminds me of the way that Guillermo del Toro handles a fairy tale in Pan's Labyrinth, or a ghost story in something like Devil's Backbone.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So the film was really working for me. The opening sequence is great. Like, it gave me like this intense feeling of like actually being airdropped from a plane. That might have been the IMAX ness of it, but it kind of, it made me feel what they were feeling in a way that like Saving Private Ryan did, like the first time you watch that like beach storming sequence. I think that, basically it's not even quite like the third act where the film loses me specifically, but it's a certain point in the third act, which I felt like was about 3/4 of the way through the film. So like the last quarter or so kind of lost me, because I felt like it got into some action that felt very generic to me, or, I felt like I'd seen it before, and it didn't really do anything to put a new twist on a action scene or an action sequence or climax that I've seen before. And up until that point, I thought a lot of the action scenes in the film were really well done. So that's part of why it disappointed me so much, I think, because it just kind of got generic for me. And I don't think it got bad. It just kind of got really okay. And prior to that, I was thinking the film was really good. So
yeah. No, yeah. I totally understand where you guys are coming from. And part of what I enjoy about the third act so much, I can't talk about until spoilers, but It has to do with my love of like The Thing and makeup.
John Carpenter.
yeah, makeup and like fun horror. And that's all I'll say for now. But I admire a lot of where this movie goes in 2018 when many movies don't dare go this way.
Sure. I mean, it's definitely confident on what it is and goes for a very specific type of film and a very specific tone.
Yeah, I agree. And that is the appeal, I think. That is the charm.
It is, yeah. And I think, well, let me ask you guys a question. Do you think this film is more for the action movie fan or more for the horror fan? Or maybe even like horror sci-fi, like you said, like The Thing. Do you think like maybe there's too much of each one to turn like the other one off? Like if you're an action fan, is there too much horror, or vice versa?
I think it's a little bit of both. I don't think there's too much of either, but I think the film is trying to be something unique. Like the film is trying to ride that balance between camp horror and camp action. But as long as you're okay with camp and that like grindhousey tone, I don't know if it matters what you're looking for. I think you'll have a good time. I think the film is a good balance of both. As long as you're willing to make that journey into, B-movie territory.
I agree with that. And I think even almost if you're not willing to make that journey into B-movie territory, this movie moves along at such a clip that you're, halfway through the movie before you even realize what it is. And you're not going to check out because you're invested in the story. I think the pacing does such a great service for this movie because it's just moving along, just, barreling along. And you don't have a chance to stop and think about much. It's just throwing all sorts of stuff at you. And that's what I really like about this movie in that beginning, 2/3 or whatever. But it's just moving along so quick. And yeah, I think that's one of the things that really makes it work.
Also, before we get too far into this, I really enjoyed the opening title card of the film. It reminded me a lot of like those like 40s World War II movies, Yeah. It has like a very propaganda reel kind of look. It reminded me of this this Fritz Lang film I saw one time called Manhunt, which was really good, I think. So anyway, I just want to say I really like that, like the World War II propaganda look.
Yeah, the end credits too, for that matter, while we're there.
Yeah, minus
they have that vibe too. I don't remember the music.
Some rap song. So this film, I want to say it did lean into the violence and gore, which I really enjoyed, but I also feel like maybe it could have leaned in a little bit more. I think the movie, in my opinion, is at its best when there were shades of 80s horror movie type stuff in there. It felt like there were a lot of practical makeup effects that reminded me, like you said earlier, of Carpenter-esque stuff. And it's actually funny because you mentioned Guillermo del Toro. I actually had John Carpenter and Guillermo del Toro in my notes to compare this to. So it's interesting, Justin, that you got to those both before I got to this note. But
well, I was going, to be fair, I was saying Carpenter off of you saying The Thing.
Yeah, that's true.
So you got that one.
Fair enough. I fed that one to you. But I would say, I think Carpenter-esque, not in subject matter, but only in like special effects and like tone of like leaning into the camp a little bit, but in like a fun way. Maybe Guillermo del Toro would be a better comparison, although I don't think it's quite as disturbing as anything makeup-wise like Cronenberg, right? It's more fun than it is disturbing, I think. But then again, I don't know. You guys may disagree with me on that because there's some pretty gross stuff in this. Did you find it more disturbing or more fun when it came to like the gore and the makeup effects?
I mean, I think it was like gross out violence and special effects at certain points. And while that's sort of like initially disturbing, it's kind of fun how disturbing it is as opposed to just being disturbing how disturbing it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it kind of ties into what you were saying in your main thoughts as how you wish you cared more about the characters. And while I like the characters, I wasn't necessarily invested in them. So I think disturbing comes from being invested in the characters. Does that make sense? And so that way, if you're not necessarily invested in the characters, it's more the gore and stuff is more fun as opposed to disturbing for me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I found it mostly to be fun.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and while we're on the characters, I kind of disagree a little bit that I wasn't invested in the characters. I don't know that I was really invested in most of the characters, although I felt like I was feeling the way about them that I was supposed to. Like, I pretty much liked the ones I was supposed to like. The ones that were annoying, and I think the film starts out moving at such a fast pace and there's so much going on that I think you're right, Mike, that we don't get to know the characters that well at first, but I think we really grow to know them and like them throughout the second act. And I think that's one thing the second act does really well.
I agree. And let me kind of explain myself a bit. It's mostly the first act in the plane that I have a problem with. I know you guys liked it, but I think the dialogue from the main characters in that plane sequence at the very beginning is all very bland. There's a lot of these like tough guy macho attitudes that we see in a lot of these, like soldiers on a mission type movies. And it felt like a bit silly at first to me, right? Like, oh, this is the stoic one who's been in action before, so he doesn't have time for their bullshit. This is the New York guy who's like from Brooklyn, who's got like an accent and no time for nonsense, and he's kind of a smart ass. Like there's these archetypes that like at this point I am so familiar with.
Right. We knew exactly who they were.
Right, exactly. That like I knew these characters. I knew who was going to die for the most part, heroically and otherwise, who was going to have an arc to become like a nicer person. Like I could see the movie playing out on that plane, right? Before they even got out of the plane. So that's kind of what I mean, which isn't bad, right? That's just me watching a lot of movies. It just felt like I could see the movie working to get those tropes in real early.
I actually enjoyed that though. It was kind of comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it reminded me of The Predator, but good.
Yeah, that's actually a good point.
Right. I thought the same thing about that opening scene specifically. And to jump off of that, I think one character that I was invested in that I really, really liked was the main girl in the film. I don't remember her character's name off the top of my head.
Oh, yeah. Basically, Shoshana 2.0 from Inglourious Bastards.
Exactly, yeah. Chloe is her character's name. Matilda Olivier.
Melanie Laurent.
Yeah. Basically, yeah. I definitely had that thought too. But I really liked her. I liked the things that she was going through and having to deal with, and the journey that her character goes on throughout the film, and the things that she ends up doing. I was very much invested in her. I don't know if it's because she's basically the only like female character.
Oh, I think she's also a stellar actress too.
Yeah, I think she's great. And for me, like she's the star standout performer in the film for me.
Yeah, I agree. I actually think the three leads are all really likable. Wyatt Russell, her, and oh man, what is the lead actor's name? The guy who plays Boyce.
Jovan Adepo.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, I think they're all top notch. I think everyone else is a little bit character actory.
Yeah,
but that's okay for this kind of movie.
Yeah, the New York guy, I was like, man, I felt like Saving Private Ryan. I was like, that guy didn't age at all. Like it was the same guy from Saving Private Ryan, the New York guy.
But, exactly. Yeah, it just felt like that character is just like, we need him in a World War II movie. You know?
Yeah.
Right. I was even thinking he was one of the actors that was in Inglourious Bastards, who played one of the bastards for a second.
It feels like a lot of this movie, the look of the movie is heavily inspired by a lot of Inglourious Bastards, and like the main girl character. It just felt like the director really, really watched a lot of Inglourious Bastards.
Sure, yeah. And speaking of the look of the film, there is one shot that I want to shout out, and it's shortly after the opening sequence. There's like a shot that's like against like a red sky, and
in the
trees?
Like
trees are silhouetted, and there's a couple of like soldiers who are dead hanging from like their parachutes in the trees.
That's a shot.
That shot is amazing. Best shot of the movie. One of the best shots I've seen this year. Like, it's just so like beautiful and cinematic. And
yeah. Right when that shot popped up, I was like, oh.
Yeah, at that point I was like, maybe I'm in good hands.
Yeah, like, oh, hang on a second. Like, this movie's going to show me some stuff, you know, like. Yeah, I agree. That shot had a great mood to it. That could have been out of anything. That could have been out of a horror movie, or it could have been out of Apocalypse Now.
That's exactly the example I was going to say.
Yeah.
Was Apocalypse Now.
Same wavelength tonight, man.
We're on it.
We are.
Speaking of same wavelength, I want to shout out another actor. Do you know who it is? Either of you? Do you want to guess?
Is it the guy from The Big Hit?
100%.
Yeah, I knew
it. Bokeem Woodbine.
Yeah. The guy from The Big Hit who has to work out his hand because he gave up on women and only wanted to masturbate.
Yeah, that guy who I love from The Big Hit. Apparently he's great in Fargo, I've been told.
Yeah, he is really good
other
in Fargo.
Things.
Yeah, you would like Fargo, the TV show, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think I would too, but at this point I just love him and will always love him from The Big Hit. So just shout out to him because I actually really enjoyed his role, and he made me laugh. Good. He's like one of those like stock characters, but like that you can kind of laugh with the movie at that character for being so
stock.
Like stock. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I agree. It's a lot more fun when a movie leans into it but still takes itself seriously. Like, I think that's the difference between something like this and a director I used to like when I was a teenager but haven't liked in so long, Robert Rodriguez. He makes movies that are kind of like lean into the B-movie aspect, but there's also the sneaking suspicion that they're actually just B movies and that he's not capable of like doing more. Whereas something like this, when it leans into its B moviness, it seems very fun. And like they're also capable of rising above it in certain moments to where you know that you're in good hands and that you're only in B movie territory because it's more fun that way.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. So I think the only other thing I have before spoilers is I just want to say, I know you guys like the plane sequence, but I think I would have liked it better if we started off and they were already in France and we got to spend a little bit more time with them on the ground, just walking and talking with less of an action sequence and kind of build towards that.
But I can understand.
But I think that's a minor complaint because I think opening on an action sequence is fine.
Yeah, you got to hook the audience. I can understand that that want, but man, I really enjoyed the. I don't know that I'd want to trade that in, but getting to know the characters is a good point.
Watching it in IMAX does sound appealing. Listening to Justin describe it.
Yeah,
for sure. And I think if you remove the context of where it is in the film, it's just like a really effective sequence and puts you in the main character's head.
Yeah, I agree. I just wonder if I could have been into the characters before Act 2.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So that does it for me for non-spoilers. I have some stuff, but I think it's best left for later.
Agreed. I got some more stuff that we can talk about too, so unless Justin, you have anything, let's move into spoilers.
No, did you guys want to recommend or not recommend the film?
I think it's safe to say it seems like we all recommend it. I'm sitting at like a 3.5 out of 5 right now. I think this movie is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And it could even be a 4 out of 5 if I watch it again later down the road.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I'm about a 7 out of 10 on it, which I think is a 3.5 out of 5.
Yeah, which translates to the exact same thing I just said.
Yeah, I'm at a 70 out of 100, so that's 700 out of 1,000. So that's where I'm at. Yeah, I agree. Going to see it. I don't know if my issues with the third act are more so than you guys, but the third act just kind of really rubbed me the wrong way. But man, the first 2 acts are so great that I recommend going to see it. And apparently going to see it in the IMAX is the way to go, which I guess is pretty much any movie.
It's
but
the bee's knees.
Yeah. There's just those first 2 acts are so great. So
yeah. Well, let's find out what happened in the third act and what rubbed you the wrong way about it in spoilers.
All right, let's do it.
No, I guess Rosebud is just a piece in a jigsaw puzzle.
I'll tell you what, you know them cigarettes you got up there, I'll tell you all about it.
And here we go.
Okay, Chris, thanks for making this journey into spoilers with us. If you don't mind, what did you hate so much about the third act that ruined the movie for you and made you hate it?
I don't... All right, well, to course correct, I did not hate the movie. I love the gore that happens to the Nazi, but there's a moment when Wyatt Russell and the Nazi are fighting, and it just kind of devolved into like a bland superhero fighting a villain.
Like Captain America.
Right. Well, and it devolves, like, I would say what it reminded me of was superhero films, like especially the Marvel ones, and they oftentimes have a villain problem. I wasn't quite as invested in it, and it was just...
Like, it seemed like a lot of what Marvel gets criticized for is the villain is oftentimes just a reverse version of the protagonist that he's fighting.
Right. And that may make sense here.
So it ends up being the same thing, right? Which is like he injects himself with like the serum, and because his face is all messed up and he'll die if he doesn't, and he becomes a super soldier. And so, the main guy has to inject himself so he can fight the monster, right? Like it's the Incredible Hulk, it's Captain America, it's Iron Man 1, it's whatever, it's
yeah. And the rest of the movie was so good for me, or I enjoyed the rest of the movie so much that it was a kind of a letdown. And I'm not sure if this is how Justin feels, but it's just that segment that just kind of left me feeling blah, especially about the third act. The rest of the movie's so great and keeps it from being really good, I think.
Right.
But I think there's a sequence almost immediately afterwards where it's like this one really long take of the main character running through the tower as it explodes, and I just... That was so great, and I just wish they had figured out a way to make that in sequence with a villain more interesting. So
yeah, but I mean, for me, it's the fight between Wyatt Russell and the main Nazi bad guy, and it's also the fight between the main character. What was his name? Boys?
Yeah,
I believe.
Boys
and like the scientist guy and what's her name, Chloe, and the I don't know if that guy was anyone important, but like the kind of like weird super soldier creature thing that gets released. Like all of that just felt so generic to me. The worst of those being the fight between Wyatt Russell and the main Nazi bad guy. It's like there's so much of like throwing someone into a wall and like pushing them down rather than killing them, and like I don't know, the fight was just so uninteresting and bland to me, and that's where the film loses me. Like I think up until that point, I'm enjoying the whole distraction thing. Like I loved the part where they like tie up the one Nazi guy to the motorcycle and like send him into the gates, and they like open the gates for him. I thought that was really fun. And like you said, Chris, like there's that pretty rad shot of him exiting and stuff. So there's just like this one pocket, which unfortunately is like the climax of the movie, that just let me down.
Yeah, so I think we're pretty much on the same page, but I'd like to hear from Mike on like how he felt about it and if it just didn't bother him. And yeah, so Mike, elaborate.
Yeah, as far as the third act, your points are all totally valid, and those thoughts were not lost on me while watching the film. I've watched every, comic book movie that's come out in the past 10 years, I think. So I'm very familiar with this kind of villain, right? I agree that it could have been better had it been more creative. And I will agree that the worst part of the third act is that fight between Wyatt Russell and Euron Greyjoy, whatever his name is.
That is Euron Greyjoy. I didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
What?
From Game of Thrones.
Oh, okay.
The main villain. He's Euron Greyjoy from Game of Thrones.
There we go. I thought he was kind of a poor man's Michael Shannon.
Yeah, makes sense.
Maybe not poor man, but German at least.
No, he's actually a very good actor.
Yeah, I think he's great in it up until the point where he's just kind of like a monster.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, should he not have been a monster? Maybe not. But I enjoyed, at that point, the movie leaning into its R rating, leaning into the gore, leaning into like the pulpiness of it all. Could it have been better? Sure. Do I know what would have made it better? No. And I don't have the energy to think about it.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's why the movie's ultimately like a 3.5 and not a 4 out of 5, right? Or like a 4.5 out of 5, right? Which is like, there's a lot this movie does. Ultimately, it doesn't come together to be something that I loved.
Yeah.
But does that third act ruin it for me? No. Does the third act, is it even bad? No. Is it standard? Yes. Which in itself may be a form of being bad. But considering how unique the rest of the movie is, it just didn't bother me. Like, there's nothing egregiously terrible, especially considering how short the ending is.
Yeah, I could see what you're saying. Like it's standard.
It's standard. I wouldn't say it's subpar. I would say it's par the course.
Yeah, maybe it's because of superhero films that it's just kind of a little bit more annoying than it would be normally. But yeah, standard is probably the right. Maybe, and it's also more annoying because it's more of a disappointment because the rest of the movie was so great. Yeah,
it's like the context of the rest of the movie, or the context of the final scene in like regards to the rest of the movie.
Yeah, like I could have used
too standard compared to how awesome the rest of the movie is and how unique it and what it's doing.
Right, I could have used 15 more minutes of body horror of him discovering crazy Nazi experiments of mutilated victims. You know, I could have used more of like a horror climax versus an action climax.
Okay, yeah, that would have actually been interesting too.
But that would have kind of changed the overall tone of the movie. So, you know, I don't know. But I agree that, you know, maybe that trope's a little tired, but also it's, you know, what are you going to do? It is what it is. Hopefully that trope ends soon. But I think the third act is saved by a lot of like, you know, at the end scene, whenever the colonel guy or whatever is asking the main character, Boyce, you know, is there anything worth digging up? And, you know, he knows that Wyatt Russell's character was like, no, our side doesn't need this either. You know, like it's not just like a circle jerk for America is awesome. It's like, no, you know, this people are terrible and no one should have this power, you know? Mm-hmm. And I liked like the pseudo intellectual, you know, horror movie, B movie kind of like society is bad and this secret is best buried and forgotten about kind of thing. Like that kind of like Tales from the Crypt kind of like or Twilight Zone kind of ending, you know?
Yeah. Right. Well, the movie starts out with my man Bokeem Woodbine giving the speech on the plane saying that, like, you know, the Nazis are assholes, but in order to beat them, we have to become them.
Right.
And I think we go full journey with the main character who...
And realizes...
At the beginning is unsure, but yeah, he's like, no, we don't have to be as bad as them. We don't have to go take advantage of this thing and, like,
evil deserves to be wiped out, period.
Super soldiers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Like evil deserves to be wiped out, period, regardless of country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I kind of like that too. You know?
Yeah.
So.
I definitely like the ending prologue. Oh, no, epilogue. Not prologue. That's backwards. Yeah. I like the ending epilogue. You know, it kind of brings me back to like a point of like feeling good about the film more so than what had come before it a little bit. And in regards to that, I do have one question about a brief little thing that happens in the third act, but like the New York guy and his whole like relationship with the kid, Chloe's younger brother, how he ends up having to like save the kid and he ends up getting shot. Like I was kind of mixed on that because it felt like a trope when it was happening.
Oh, yes.
And then he didn't die. Like he was alive later.
Like he was supposed to die.
Yeah. And so like the trope was like, okay, he's going to die, but then he didn't. But that's also kind of feels like the weak way out of it to like not have him die. So like I was like, it's not the trope, but also maybe it's worse. I don't know. And maybe it's better. I don't know. What did you guys think about that?
Yeah, no, I definitely thought as he was saving the child, I was like, here it is. The moment I've been waiting for. Whether he died or not, I genuinely don't care, to be honest with you. So,
Right.
It worked fine. I knew it was going to happen as soon as he had his first scene with the child, right?
Right.
So, whether he died or not was like the only question that was really in my mind. So the fact that he didn't is fine. Would it have been better if he did? Maybe, but
yeah, I think I like the moment that they have, like, afterwards. It's kind of a sweet moment between him and the kid's like mimicking him. So that's a satisfying moment for me.
Yeah, that was nice. And I guess I found myself thinking of Seven Samurai and with Toshiro Mifune's character, who like is a really big hit with the kids, and the kids are obsessed with him and like kind of follow him around and watch him. And he ends up dying, and that kind of has a pretty big emotional impact for that reason. So I don't know if I guess that's why I was thinking like, oh, him not dying isn't like that impactful, because Seven Samurai did the same thing but better.
Yeah, this is a classic men on a mission movie that you don't see a lot of these days. You used to see a lot of like World War II men on a mission movies with like The Dirty Dozen and Guns of the Navarone, the original Italian Inglourious Bastards. So I enjoy that genre is still alive today.
Yeah. I have a question. Something I missed about the movie, or I'm not quite clear on. So the first time he's kind of delving into the tower and discovering all these experiments, he finds one of his friends in there with the thing stabbed into him.
Oh, I have this as a note as well.
Yeah, okay, so was that friend dead? Like, I guess he wasn't. I thought that when he discovered him that he was dead and that he had been brought back to life. But I suppose not, because everybody else acted really weird when that happened. Yeah. So I'm not sure what was going on with him.
Yeah, I was going to ask you guys, did you think that he was going to be like infected later on? But it was like a delayed response because he had that thing pulled out of him?
Mm-hmm, that's what I was thinking. I thought that he would be
Yeah, like I was expecting a twist where that guy's like, guys, I don't feel good, like in the third act somewhere.
Yeah, and he attacks him or something.
Yeah, but anyways.
I didn't expect that, because it seemed like the room that he found him in, like he finds him and then he sees someone get injected. So I kind of assumed that it was the room for like the people
prepping,
waiting to be injected who are undergoing experiments prior to injection.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I guess that makes sense. I just thought that he had already been injected, and I missed that. So
yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what the like hose that was attached to him was. There's no real like explanation for that. I'm not sure there needs to be, because it's just weird
thing that
Nazi
came out of him, like it
experiments.
stabbed him, and it was like in his torso. So like he pulled like a 6-inch rod out from the guy. So I thought it was like an injector of like something. Let me ask you guys. In my opinion, the best scene of the film is when Boyce injects the recently dead friend soldier with the serum. Right. And none of them really understand what is happening as the guy comes back to life. And Wyatt Russell's character, Ford, I believe is his name, has to shoot the guy because he starts freaking out. In my opinion, I think all of that scene is just masterful. And I think that is the most compelling scene of the movie. What did you guys think?
I agree with you. I don't know that it's up there for sure. And the way it goes, so he's dead and everybody's sad. And then he stabs him and he's come back to life and people are mystified as to why this is happening, but relieved that he's back. And then it goes to terror. So like it's just this roller coaster of emotions, and all the characters around him as you watch how they're reacting is so mesmerizing or compelling. That's the word. It's so compelling to watch them. You're right, Mike. That's a really good scene.
Yeah. Well, just the fact that it has to end with him shooting his friend, and like 30 seconds earlier, if you would have asked him, that's not how he would have expected that scene to go. You know what I mean? So
right.
like,
well,
the idea that it can go from like happy to like something's very, very wrong so quickly.
I mean, it's even worse than shooting. He doesn't like.
Well, yeah,
basically
but like the initial decision to have to shoot your friend who just came back to life, like that's not a decision that was arrived at lightly,
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the emotional journey, but also an important part in there is like we go from sadness that the character was shot and then he's dead to like hope that maybe this like serum will do something because we know it kind of keeps things alive. Then he comes up and like it actually gets really funny, like the film for like, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds before he starts freaking out. Because he gets up and they're like, oh man, he's like, you got shot in the chest or whatever. He's like, yeah, no, it didn't even hurt at all. Like,
yeah, he was thirsty.
Yeah, like it gets kind of funny for a second. So then we get funny, and then we get to like all of that crazy freak out stuff, which is kind of nuts and scary, and then to the emotional part of having to shoot him and kill him yourself. It's like, it's such a journey. So I'm with you that scene is great.
Yeah, I really like that scene, and if the rest of the movie had been terrible, which it wasn't, that scene would have probably made me recommend the movie to fans of like genre films, you know?
Right.
So yeah. That's where I come down. I'm still sitting at a 3.5 out of 5, but I'm feeling more comfortable with it.
Yeah. I have one more point that I want to talk about that is actually kind of based around that scene a little bit.
Yeah.
And this is my one thing that, even though I was enjoying the film, it kept popping up in my head because it didn't quite work for me, or it kind of like kept me from suspending disbelief and fully buying into everything that was going on. And that was that the whole time that like these guys are in this attic and they're doing stuff, there are times where they are being so loud and so like obnoxious that there's no way that like the Nazis who like run this town and are constantly searching like would have caught them, because there are scenes where like you can hear German officers yelling at people or talking to people outside, like through the walls, like while they're in the attic.
Yeah.
But then you have scenes like that one where people are literally screaming and there's gunshots and nobody seems to like ever come in and check on it. And that really kind of bugged me. And there's other scenes where they're just yelling at each other and arguing.
Yeah,
very
I remember
loudly.
When the guy got shot in the attic initially, I was thinking like the gunshots were like the jig is up, you know? But like,
I had that thought so many times.
Later, there were more gunshots, and still nothing ever came of it. So I kind of just forgot about that. But no, you're totally right.
I thought there was a line in there where they're like, "We have to get out of here because we just shot the gun." They've heard
they
us.
did, but they took their time with it. I think
Yeah.
Maybe some more immediacy would have made Justin's point a moot point.
Yeah, and even other things like when they first walk into the attic, they turn the light on. And there's like a window and there's Nazis right outside, and like eventually they come in, but like the light in the attic is like, looking at the window, there's just like a thin sheet or blanket over it, so like you can see that there's a light on in the attic. I don't know, it just seemed like they weren't being very sneaky.
Yeah, valid point.
But pretty nitpicky, but it is something that distracted me. But I think it's a credit to the rest of the movie that I was still enjoying it and was like kind of letting it go.
Yeah. It's easy to forgive sins in a movie like this, I think, more than it is like a this isn't Schindler's List, so
Or Saving Private Ryan at that, like if,
right. So
Right.
it's a little bit more fun when it kind of leans into its B-movie adventure-ness of it all. But I totally agree with you. There are things that could have made this movie a lot better.
But yeah, I don't like it any less than I did when I walked out of the theater. Like, it's kind of a film that I've seen it, and it's as good as it was while I was watching it. And I'm not sure that it's going to grow on me or, dissipate in any way in terms of how much I like it. Like, I think it is what it is, and it's enjoyable. It's good.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right. So does that do it for our episode today?
I
believe
think so, yeah.
so.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Chris and Mike, for talking to me about the movie today.
You are so welcome.
Thank you, Justin.
I really thank you guys, but, I think we should thank each other a lot more for doing it.
I appreciate you.
I think you should thank me more often, too.
Yeah, maybe I will. Maybe not. I don't know. Now you seem entitled.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And of course, thank you, Jake Wagner Russell, for doing our intro and outro music. You can hear more of his music at soundcloud.com/bopscotch.
Next week, we will be reviewing a film that was on my most anticipated of fall, which is Steve McQueen's Widows, which I am very excited for. So be there or be square.
Yeah. It's another one that I'm mystified on based on the trailer, because I was very excited about it, but I saw the trailer and I'm kind of like, well, this could go either way now. So
yeah, the trailer makes it look a lot more like a thriller than I have a feeling it will be.
Right.
Based on Steve McQueen's other movies.
Yeah, and if you guys want to send us some questions, some topics to talk about in regards to Widows, send those to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at casualcinecast, or our email, casualcinemedia@gmail.com.
Thanks so much, guys, for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
See you later.